Hey guys, the next major update for Dreadhunger came out a few days back, and I've been gathering my thoughts to make this analysis video ever since. There's a bunch of graphic update changes which add to the game's overall complete look, a proximity chat revamp, and a list of minor changes to the actual gameplay. Let's get straight into it. Definitely the largest part of this update is the new cook. In a word, he's hysterical. He's the only character on the ship who's actually happy to be there, and his double chins are gorgeous. Just look at him. Just look at him. But most importantly, it's clear which character he is at a glance. Every character in the game is now clear at who they are at a glance. My only requested change would be to make the cook spawn with 5 meat instead of 4, so you can make a full stew solely from the cook alone, including his chopped limbs, because he's just that little bit more tubby. Hopefully with such a lovable model, we'll see an increase in cook mates. The second graphic update were the new seals. Okay, so these little guys are ridiculously cute. They're little sausages who wiggle along the ice, making cute as fuck sounds, and roll over on their side when they get tired from running away. My heart aches when I have to kill one of these little fellas, and now that it takes more than just one hit of the meat cleaver to kill due to an increase to their health, there's an extra window for ethical debate and dilemma, and stop what you're doing to leave the cute little fella alone. Next, we have 3 fun new emotes that you can use by pressing the Y key on your keyboard during the poker game, as well as after the game to pose for your photo that pops up on the screen. One of them, the chest bump, is an exclusive, only available to those who purchase Dreadhunger in early access. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a big fan of exclusives. I worked so hard to get my prestige skins in Dead by Daylight back in 2016, and I'm hoping years from now, I'll be able to show off my early access emotes in Dreadhunger every game, as I do in Dead by Daylight. Well, with the prestige skin anyway. This patch also brought an update to the tutorial. The reworked tutorial clearly teaches the absolute basics for Dreadhunger: how to move, sprint, cook, and eat food. The animations are awesome, and it was actually fun to play through. I'm very excited for the developers to build on this and to make the game as easy to learn for new players as possible from within the game itself. It also gave me just a taste of what Dreadhunger was like without latency. The crispness of how quickly you could harvest the meat off the body, it made me envy those closest to the servers. Perhaps one day we'll have Australian servers. We can dream! Though I've always felt that the latency in Dreadhunger was completely bearable. And I think that it's because of how crisp the game is by default. With the extra latency, I don't feel like I'm at some huge disadvantage against those who are closer to the servers. Except in melee fights. Fuck melee fights. I hate melee fights. Moving on. There were a few minor UI changes that were added this update, namely in the form of a few new icons. Player icons in the pre and post game, as well as when you press the escape key in-game, are now the icons associated with each class. This way you can easily tell which player is playing each role. The icons look schmick, and I'd love to know who made them and commissioned the fuck out of them. I don't even need anything specific. I just love their art style. There's also a new icon for the fuel of the ship from the perspective of the driver, with a coal icon in the center of the gauge in the bottom right. This should clearly indicate, especially to new players, where to look to see how much fuel is left in the boiler while driving. The patch notes mention there being a new icon for lantern, stew, and health, but I'm pretty sure that was a typo or left out from the previous update, as they look pretty much the same to me. Maybe I'm missing something. Pretty sure it was a typo, given that those exact 3 icons were only changed recently in a previous patch. Now, there were a few quality of life changes made this update. Your character now spawns in the captain's quarters upon entering the game, which will speed up joining games and give newer players a clear location to move to, that being the table that's highlighted in blue with the maps and lobbies in it. There's also a notification when transferring into a new lobby, and as host, you can opt to leave the players in your lobby behind. It's a bit of a dick move to the people in your lobby, but it's good for you if you see a lobby with just one space and you're like, sorry, 4 people in my lobby. I'm gonna go play now. Now, of course, there was the major sound overhaul this update, with in-game microphones sounding silky smooth. They appear to be peaking far less in-game, and the quality of the sound has improved significantly. I'm a huge fan of the new echo effect when talking in a cave, and the sounds are a little more muffled when the 2 players talking are separated by a wall. All of these changes really sell Dread Hunger as a game of quality and adds to the already impressive list of reasons to buy the game. It feels like the game is really earning its $35 Australian price tag, and I'm just sick of hearing people say that they don't feel like they're getting their money's worth when they buy Dread Hunger. It feels like the biggest bullshit, or maybe the person hasn't got patience and hasn't learnt the game. I don't know. It makes me scream a little inside and want to tell them how wrong they are. But we'll move on from that. A somewhat downside of the new voice program is the voice chat no longer continues to work whilst alt-tabbed. I know plenty of my friends would alt-tab out of the game and still listen to the conversations so they're in the loop when they alt-tab back in, and I can see why it may bother people now that it's been removed. But in all honesty, I'm more than okay with this sacrifice. I like my peace and quiet, and alt-tabbing actually removing me from the game sounds entirely is a big tick in my book. Alright, so a couple of small extra changes to the game that I've noticed that were not in the patch notes include the following. You sink more when you jump in the water than you did in previous patches. In other words, you need to account for about an extra half a second to a second of time that you'll be exposed to a negative cold rate of 3 when jumping in the water. It could be the difference between life and death, and you also need to factor in where you're jumping to, as when you sink, your mouse sinks too, and you aren't able to grab, say, the ladder of the boat as easily, and you may die. Secondly, the pillar at the back of the Nitro Cave on the summit can no longer be hidden behind. This means there's effectively less options for Thrall. It was relatively common, at least in my games, for Thralls to hide behind that pillar, with a Nitro or 2 ready to shoot when players got close, and Spirit walk away once they'd shot it. Now that it's removed entirely, Thralls will need to create their own Nitro traps elsewhere. Finally, I've noticed that totems cannot be placed near walls anymore, presumably to prevent clipping them through walls. It also seems the ground needs to be relatively flat too, something to be mindful of when building totems. Now, onto the noticeable changes from the patch notes. Finally, the money changes, the big boys. The stove can now cook 2 items at once. You heard me. This is a nice change and will allow for much more interesting games for stew makers. Locking yourself in the stove to protect a stew won't just remove you from playing the game for 2 minutes anymore. You can cook other things at the same time. Woohoo! It gives Thralls more options to make stew and hide the sound of brewing poison at the same time as well. Next, the Doctor's perk has been reworked, removing the increased revival speed if placed in a bed by the Doctor, and replaced with the increased healing. It's a very noticeable buff. 60% works out to be about 80 health restored, which makes syringes injected by the Doctor far more desirable than they were previously. I'm very happy with this change, in addition to keeping the extra time holding bodies. It feels like the Doctor now has a playstyle for both Thrall and crew. Crewmates can build syringes and be a sort of support healer if they choose to be, and providing meaningful health restoration that the crew wouldn't have gotten without them. And as a Thrall, the Doctor will be able to benefit from that increased healing whenever they're injured or push their body too far and they need to restore health after a fight. Crafted weapons now do more damage according to the patch notes, but when I tested this out, it appears the maximum range which the max damage can be inflicted when thrown has been reduced more than anything. Throwing an axe from a decent range will do approximately 48 damage, assuming a player's maximum health is 100. This is a significant buff, and just adds another reason to build an axe as soon as possible. A gunshot followed by an axe throw would one-shot a player if health regeneration didn't exist and you hit both shots. Finally, the spyglass can now officially pick up the new, crisp, smooth voices of the players it's spying on. It appears to mute the audio of what's going on around you and replace it with the sound of the area you're looking at. Now, all we need is for the looted feature of the spyglass to actually work as intended, and the spyglass will take its rightful place as the best melee tool in the game. It was a pretty big update, but ultimately, it hasn't changed too much gameplay-wise. Sure, less seals are dying, and you'll spend half a day following the cook around, but there wasn't a lot to freshen up the gameplay itself. I'm a huge fan of Dread Hunger, but I'm worried. Lobbies are taking longer to fill, at least at 7 PM Australian time, and the ones that do launch are having more connection issues than ever before. If a game does go ahead, the amount you can do as a crewmate is feeling more and more limited. Perhaps I've played too much and have exhausted a lot of options, but it's becoming more and more repetitive, with creative Thrall players being the exception, not the rule. If it were up to me, I'd focus on creating more and more options for Thralls in how they sabotage and slow down the crew. Add extra ways to sabotage the boiler, either with an extra chute, say next to the wheel or on the top deck, or removing the one player in the boiler at once restriction. Create new mechanics entirely, perhaps setting the ship on fire, or collision to allow for a pushing mechanic that could push players off the hill or into the water. A Dread Hunger new ideas video is in the works, so a lot of these ideas haven't been thought through, but I'd love to see the game have more things added to it, and just see how it goes. If it doesn't work, remove it entirely and try something else, or reshape the idea based on player feedback. I'm concerned that with the dwindling numbers after a major update, there needs to be new mechanics added whilst tweaking existing ones. It's a lot of work, so I understand it may not be possible right away, but I really see potential for Dread Hunger. Potential that I'd hate to see go to waste. With all of that said, I still really enjoyed this update. I'm thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead and being particularly harsh given full release is likely not too far away. New mechanics don't need to be rushed out, but planning to bring them into the game to improve replayability will be the key to continue growing this game and at finding the success it so deserves. Thanks for watching, guys. Keep an eye on the channel for more gameplay videos and Dread Hunger guides, and swing by my Twitch stream to see me play Dread Hunger live. Good luck out in the Arctic, and watch out for Bongo.